You know, we tend to think about money like it's a math problem, right? You crunch the numbers, you use the right formulas, and you get the right answer. But what if I told you that getting wealthy, and more importantly, staying wealthy, has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down, and it all starts with two wildly different stories. So on one hand, you've got Ronald Reed. He was a gas station attendant and a janitor for his entire life, never made a huge salary. But when he passed away, he left behind an $8 million fortune. Then, on the other hand, you have Richard Fuscone, Harvard-educated, a top executive at Merrill Lynch. He retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist, and then he went completely bankrupt. Lost it all.
I mean, think about that for a second. A janitor financially outperforms a Harvard-trained finance exec. It just sounds wrong. It's not supposed to happen, right? You'd never see a janitor step in and perform a better heart surgery than a top surgeon. So what on earth makes money so different?
Well, that puzzle is at the very heart of Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. And the core idea is this: financial success isn't a hard science, it's a soft skill. What you know, the degrees, the spreadsheets, the fancy theories, it all matters way less than how you act. It's all about your behavior, your psychology, and let's be honest, our psychology around money is a pretty messy and complicated thing.
Okay, so let's start with our first huge idea here: busting the myth of rationality. We all like to think we're logical when it comes to our finances, but the truth is, what we call rational is really just a story we tell ourselves, a story that's shaped by our own, very personal, very narrow slice of history.
This quote just nails it. Every single financial decision you make probably seems perfectly logical to you. Why? Because it's based on what you've seen and experienced with your own two eyes. But the problem is, your personal experience is just an infinitesimally tiny speck of what's actually happened out there in the world.
Take this, for example. If you were born in 1970, you grew up watching the stock market go up nearly 10 times during your most formative years. The lesson you learned? Stocks are amazing wealth-building machines. But if you were born just 20 years earlier, in 1950, you saw the market go basically nowhere for years. The lesson you learned? Stocks are a risky gamble.
And it's the exact same story with inflation. If you grew up in the 70s and 80s, you saw prices soaring and learned to fear inflation. But if you were born in 1990, it's barely been a blip on your radar. So you have two different people looking at the exact same data who come to completely opposite conclusions, all because of the different worlds they grew up in.
So the big takeaway here is really important. Before you judge someone for buying lottery tickets, or maybe for being too scared to invest in the stock market, you have to remember this: no one is crazy. Their decisions make perfect sense to them because they're being filtered through their own unique and really powerful life experiences.
Okay, so if we're not totally rational, what else are we missing? Well, that brings us to our next myth to bust: the myth of control. We absolutely love telling stories about brilliant founders who single-handedly changed the world, but we often forget about the two invisible forces that are just as powerful as hard work: luck and its twin sister, risk.
I mean, everyone knows Bill Gates is a genius, that's a given. But he also got hit by a massive lightning bolt of luck. He just happened to go to Lakeside School, which was one of the only high schools on the entire planet that had a computer way back in 1968. That gave him a head start that was pretty much impossible for anyone else to get. The odds of a teenager in 1968 attending a school with a computer? Literally 1 in a million. That is pure, unadulterated luck. But luck, as we said, has a sibling.
See, back at Lakeside, Bill Gates had a best friend named Kent Evans, and by Gates's own admission, Kent was just as smart, just as driven, and just as good with computers. They were planning to go into business together, but Kent Evans died in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school.
The odds of something like that happening? Yep, also about 1 in a million. This is risk. It's the exact same force as luck, with the exact same power, just pointing in the opposite direction. For every Bill Gates who catches a lucky break, there's a Kent Evans who got hit by the tragic side of chance. And this is why we have to be so careful when we look at success and failure, both in others and in ourselves. When things are going amazing, you have to leave a little room for luck. And when things are falling apart, you have to acknowledge the reality of risk. It's just never as simple as saying they made good decisions or they made bad decisions. Understanding that luck and risk are always in the background brings us to our third and maybe most dangerous lesson: the paradox of always wanting more, especially when you already have everything. Let me tell you about Rajat Gupta.
This guy was born into poverty in India, orphaned as a teenager. I mean, he overcame unbelievable odds to become the CEO of McKinsey. He was one of the most successful and respected business leaders on the entire planet. His was the ultimate rags to riches story.
By 2008, his net worth was already around $100 million. He had power, prestige, freedom, he had it all. But for him, it just wasn't enough.
See, he wanted to be a billionaire, and that hunger for more led him to commit insider trading. It was a crime that sent him to prison and completely destroyed his reputation forever. He risked things he had and absolutely needed for something he didn't have and definitely didn't need. Why? Because he had no sense of enough. And that brings us to the final, and I think the most important question that all of this raises: what is your enough? Because figuring out the answer to that is the single most critical financial skill you can ever learn. I absolutely love this story. The author Joseph Heller was at a party once, and his friend pointed out that their billionaire host had made more money in a single day than Heller's classic novel Catch-22 had earned in its entire history. And Heller's reply was just perfect. He said, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough."
That's what it's all about. Having enough means you recognize the things that are truly invaluable, the things you should never, ever risk, no matter how big the potential payoff is. I'm talking about your reputation, your freedom, your family and friends, being loved by the people you want to love you, and your own happiness. These are the things that really matter, and no paycheck is worth losing them.
At the end of the day, it really comes down to this. The world we live in is a machine that's brilliant at creating two things: wealth and envy. The hamster wheel of comparing yourself to others, it's endless. The only way to actually win that game is to stop playing it. The hardest financial skill in the world is getting the goalpost to stop moving. And so that's the question I want to leave you with. True wealth isn't about having more than the next person. It's about having what you need to live the life you want to live. So as you go about your day, just ask yourself this: what is the real price of more in my life? And is that a price I'm actually willing to pay?